Orcas, majestic denizens of the ocean, are often confined to captivity for entertainment purposes, far removed from their natural habitats. Some view these intelligent creatures as lucrative assets, starring in grand shows and iconic films. However, exploiting these powerful predators frequently leads to tragedy. Today, we delve into these harrowing stories. Are you prepared to uncover the dark side of this industry? Steve Abel was a veteran SeaWorld trainer, known to thousands of visitors at the San Antonio park. Over nearly 2 decades, he formed an impressive bond with the massive orca Kai, captivating audiences with their synchronized movements and trust-filled routines. But on a summer day in 2004, this trust would face its greatest test. A day that started as a routine performance took a sudden and terrifying turn. On July 27th, with the sun rising high over San Antonio, SeaWorld Stadium filled with eager spectators for the Shamu Adventure Show. At the center of this spectacle were Steve and Kai, a 9,000-pound orca stretching 22 feet in length. The routine was carefully crafted over years of training, perfected in countless rehearsals. Steve, with 17 years of experience, knew Kai's every move and had fostered a strong connection with him. Today seemed like any other show, until it wasn't. Steve had long been admired by fans and colleagues alike, known for his calm demeanor and near-instinctive understanding of marine animals. Kai, in turn, had become a fixture in these performances, often mesmerizing the crowd with his athletic displays. Despite the grandeur, the risks were always present, lurking just beneath the surface. Kai, a fully grown orca, possessed an immense untamed strength, and while years of training allowed Steve to develop a rapport with the animal, he understood the delicate line he walked with each show. Would today be the day that line was crossed? As the performance began, Steve entered the tank, moving in sync with Kai. The orca executed flips and spins with ease, eliciting cheers from the audience. Every maneuver seemed routine, every interaction calculated. But then, with no apparent provocation, Kai's behavior changed. Steve gave a command, but instead of complying, Kai paused. Steve tried to redirect him with a familiar signal, but the orca's gaze had turned unreadable, his movements suddenly unpredictable. Suddenly, Kai's demeanor shifted. With a swift, unrestrained surge, he charged at Steve, sending waves crashing against the sides of the tank. The impact hit like a tidal wave, and Steve, momentarily stunned, struggled to regain his balance. For a brief, harrowing moment, the audience thought this might be part of the performance, but the intensity of Kai's movements told a different story. The orca's strikes grew more forceful, his powerful body slamming into Steve, who fought to stay above the waterline. Kai seized Steve, holding him underwater. In an instant, the orca launched him upward, only to slam him back down, each motion displaying Kai's immense strength. Steve's training instincts engaged as he struggled to stay calm, his muscles straining to keep his head above water. The orca's 9,000-pound frame turned into a powerful force, tossing Steve around as if he weighed nothing. At the pool's edge, fellow trainers sprang into action, slapping the water and throwing fish in desperate attempts to draw Kai's attention. The atmosphere buzzed with tension as they frantically signaled, trying every emergency tactic to reach him. Yet, Kai, later described as overstimulated, remained beyond their cues, his focus locked solely on Steve. Would any of their efforts break through the powerful orca's single-minded intensity? With a surge of adrenaline, Steve managed to free himself briefly, only for Kai to rush at him again, dragging him to the tank's depths. Each brutal slam echoed underwater, leaving Steve battered and breathless. The audience, horrified, sat in stunned silence, many covering their eyes, unable to bear what felt like Steve's final moments. But through sheer will, Steve held on. using his years of experience to stay still whenever Kai let go, avoiding movements that might trigger another attack. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Kai's aggression eased. As Steve pulled himself from the tank, the silence was broken by scattered gasps and murmurs from the stunned audience. Trainers rushed to his side, steadying him as he caught his breath, his body bearing the visible marks of the ordeal. The reality of what had just unfolded set in, and SeaWorld staff quickly ushered the crowd away, keenly aware of the gravity of the incident. In the aftermath of Steve's encounter with Kai, SeaWorld took immediate steps to reevaluate its protocols and policies. Close contact interactions with Kai were permanently suspended, and the incident added fuel to the growing debate over orca captivity. Marine parks often present a captivating image of thrilling performances with magnificent animals, but behind the scenes, the reality can be starkly different. Working with powerful creatures like orcas comes with risks that can lead to devastating consequences. For Kelty Byrne, a trainer at Sealand, the joy of working with these incredible animals would soon become overshadowed by tragedy. Sealand of the Pacific, located in Canada, was known for its exciting displays featuring orcas, sea lions, and dolphins. Each day, the trainers and animals captivated audiences, creating a facade that masked the often harsh realities of captivity. Among the orcas was Tilikum, a killer whale with a troubled past that raised significant ethical concerns about keeping such intelligent creatures confined. Tilikum was captured off the coast of Iceland at just 2 years old, torn from his pod, and thrust into a life of confinement. His first year in captivity was particularly difficult, filled with isolation and stress. When he arrived at Sealand in 1984, he shared a tank with 2 older female orcas, Ha-1 and Nutka-4. The close quarters led to a harsh social hierarchy, and Tilikum often found himself the target of bullying, resulting in significant physical and mental strain. Despite his troubled past, Tilikum had a strong bond with his trainers, particularly Eric Walters, a biologist who recognized the need for compassionate care. However, the demands of entertainment often overshadowed the animal's welfare. In an effort to manage the aggressive dynamics among the orcas, Sealand hired a new head trainer named Bruce Stevens from SeaWorld. He warned the trainers that if they didn't keep the orcas engaged, the animals might resort to dangerous behavior to entertain themselves. But as we know about human nature, many ignored this warning or failed to act until the situation grew dire. They believed they had more time, unaware that the tensions among the orcas were escalating. Eric, among those trainers, grew increasingly concerned as he noticed Tilikum and the other orcas becoming restless. He believed that the environment at Sealand was like a fast food restaurant, where the focus was on quick entertainment rather than the well-being of the animals. Tilikum, a highly intelligent creature, deserved more than a life filled with repetitive routines. As boredom and frustration set in among the orcas, they began to display increasingly aggressive behaviors. This change in demeanor made any interaction with humans more dangerous. By May 1989, Eric decided to leave Sealand. He felt that the situation was becoming untenable and feared that someone would eventually get hurt. Tragically, his warning would come true on February 20th, 1991, when an ordinary day at the park transformed into a nightmare. While visitors enjoyed the attractions, Kelty, a passionate 20-year-old trainer, prepared for her shift. She loved her work with the orcas, especially Tilikum. The morning started like any other. Trainers fed the orcas and moved through their usual routines. Kelty felt a spark of excitement as she stepped into the training area, her pulse quickening at the thought of working with Tilikum. But something felt different. The orcas were unusually restless, splashing and vocalizing louder than usual. Kelty noticed Tilikum circling the tank with a powerful energy that hinted at his frustration. She felt a twinge of unease but set it aside, focusing on the day's schedule. As the trainers went through their morning drills, Kelty worked closely with Tilikum, trying to engage him with toys and signals. The other trainers exchanged worried glances, but the routine continued. Kelty felt a thrill every time she interacted with Tilikum, oblivious to the growing tension. She believed she could manage the situation, confident in her bond with the Orca. The moment of crisis came unexpectedly. After finishing her training session, Kelty slipped and fell into Tilikum's tank. In a split second, Tilikum seized her foot, dragging her beneath the surface. Panic erupted as her fellow trainers rushed to help. The sight of Kelty in Tilikum's grasp was horrifying. She was caught by a 22.5-foot long, 12,500-pound giant with strength that made escape impossible. Still, she fought fiercely, gasping for breath each time she surfaced, only to be pulled back under by the powerful Orca. Chaos erupted as trainers threw life rings into the tank, desperately trying to save Kelty. They banged on buckets and tossed fish to distract the Orcas, but Tilikum's grip remained unyielding. In a terrifying moment, Kelty surfaced, caught in Tilikum's jaws, screaming for help. Then, just as quickly, she vanished beneath the water's surface, silence replacing her cries. Despite her drowning, it took the trainers another 2 hours to persuade the Orcas to release her. By that time, Tilikum and the other whales had bitten and stripped her multiple times, showcasing the power and unpredictability of these magnificent creatures. Retrieving her body took nearly 2 hours, during which Tilikum and the other whales continued to bite and drag her, a stark demonstration of their immense power. Tilikum, being the largest orca in captivity, made Kelty's struggle even more perilous. Sealand's management quickly labeled the incident a tragic accident. However, many, including Paul Spong, director of Orca Lab, believed it was predictable, stemming from the harsh conditions the orcas endured. In the wake of the tragedy, Sealand closed its doors, but Tilikum's story continued when he was transferred to SeaWorld in Orlando. There, trainers claimed to be unaware of his troubled history, overlooking the warning signs that had accompanied his past. This oversight would lead to further tragedy. In July 1999, Daniel Dukes, a man who had evaded security to spend the night in the park, was found dead in Tilikum's tank, his body showing signs of trauma. It was a quiet July night at SeaWorld Orlando, Florida. During the day, the sprawling park buzzed with families and excitement, but now it lay silent under the faint glow of the moon. The only sounds were the gentle ripples in the tanks where the park's most famous residents rested. In the largest enclosure swam Tilikum, a 12,000-pound orca measuring over 22 feet in length. Known for his immense size and striking black and white patterns, Tilikum was both awe-inspiring and enigmatic, a creature whose sheer presence hinted at raw, untamed power beneath the surface. But this calm was about to shatter with the arrival of an unexpected intruder. Daniel Dukes, a 27-year-old drifter, was a man of contradictions. He had a troubled history marked by drug abuse and a string of petty arrests for offenses like trespassing, theft, and drug possession. While gentle and nature-loving to some, neighbors described him as a kind soul who fed the homeless and cared for wildlife. Others saw a man wrestling with deep personal struggles. Dukes was also prone to impulsive, erratic behavior. In one infamous incident, he broke into the home of Richard Garriott, the creator of the game Ultima, which Dukes was reportedly obsessed with. Rather than fleeing when Garriott fired a warning shot, Dukes bizarrely made his way to the bedroom, stripped down, and climbed into Garriott's bed before being arrested by police. In the days leading up to his fateful encounter with Tilikum, Dukes had been arrested again and was reportedly behaving oddly in the SeaWorld park. While most visitors saw orcas as mere spectacles, Dukes viewed them as spiritual beings, an idea that would ultimately lead him too close to danger. On the day of the incident, Daniel Dukes entered SeaWorld like any other guest, blending seamlessly into the crowds. He wandered the park, taking in the sights, but it was clear that one attraction captivated him more than any other. From the stands overlooking the Orca tanks, his gaze remained fixed on Tilikum. While other visitors came and went, chatting and snapping photos, Daniel lingered, watching the massive orca with an intensity that set him apart. As the day drew to a close and the crowds began to thin, Daniel's behavior took on an unusual determination. Despite the barriers and prominent warning signs around the enclosures, he showed no intention of leaving. Whether driven by a yearning for freedom or a misguided belief in forging a deeper connection with the orca, his resolve was unshaken. When the park's gates finally closed and the last visitors filed out, Daniel stayed behind, alone in his thoughts and purpose. With the park now cloaked in darkness, Daniel made his move. The once vibrant SeaWorld, now eerily deserted, transformed into a silent and shadowy expanse. Slipping past security unnoticed, he navigated the grounds with careful determination. As he approached Tilikum's enclosure, the path grew dim, lit only by faint overhead lights. The tank loomed ahead, an enormous shadowy abyss. The only sounds were the low hum of machinery and the gentle sloshing of water against the tank walls, a deceptive calm before the events that would soon unfold. Standing at the edge, Duke stripped down to his shorts. The night air was cool against his skin, but he felt no hesitation. With a deep breath, he climbed over the barrier and slipped into the water. The surface rippled briefly before settling, leaving nothing but silence. Unbeknownst to Dukes, Tilikum was far from dormant. Beneath the water, the orca stirred, alerted by the disturbance. Years of captivity had dulled Tilikum's connection to the wild, but his instincts remained intact. His massive body moved gracefully through the water, his dark eyes fixated on the figure above. At first, Dukes floated calmly, his movements cautious as he adjusted to the cool water. The tank felt larger than it appeared from the outside, the depths stretching into an unnerving darkness. But as he drifted, a shadow emerged beneath him. Tilikum's presence was immense, his bulk cutting through the water with quiet precision. Dukes was likely unaware of the danger until it was too late. The attack was swift. Tilikum surged upward like a freight train, ramming into Dukes with crushing force. The impact shattered his ribs, leaving him stunned and helpless. Against 12,000 pounds of raw power, survival was impossible. As the water erupted in a chaotic frenzy, Tilikum's jaws clamped down on Dukes in an unexpected place, his scrotum. With a powerful grip, the orca dragged him beneath the surface, pulling him deeper into the tank. The water churned violently as Tilikum thrashed, his movements a chilling combination of instinct and aggression. Within moments, the water stilled again. Dukes' body floated lifelessly as Tilikum circled beneath him, nudging the figure as if trying to make sense of what had occurred. The next morning brought the discovery. Trainers arriving for the day's preparations found the scene horrific. Floating in the tank was the battered body of Daniel Dukes, his injuries severe and unmistakable. It was clear he had met a violent end. The orca's immense jaws had left deep wounds, and the evidence pointed to an attack of overwhelming force. The news spread quickly, leaving the public in shock. Questions swirled around how Dukes had managed to evade security and why he had entered the tank in the first place. Investigators pieced together his actions, uncovering a mix of wanderlust and dangerous curiosity that had led him to the enclosure. Tilikum's role in the incident reignited a firestorm of debate. This was not the first death associated with the orca. His history included other incidents that had raised concerns about his captivity. Critics argued that years of confinement had fostered aggression in the animal, turning a once majestic predator into a ticking time bomb. For SeaWorld, the tragedy was a public relations nightmare. The park faced renewed scrutiny over its practices, with activists pointing to Tilikum's violent history as evidence of the dangers of captivity. Yet, for all the outrage, the central question remained unanswered. What had driven Daniel Dukes to such a reckless act? Jessica Radcliffe seemed destined for a career working with marine animals. Her father, a marine biologist specializing in cetaceans, introduced her to the wonders of the ocean at a young age. Growing up near the Pacific coast, Jessica often accompanied him on research trips, watching in awe as he studied dolphins and whales. Her fascination grew stronger after attending her first orca show at Ocean Haven Marine Park, a facility inspired by the success of SeaWorld and quickly gaining fame near Monterey, California. From that moment, Jessica was determined to become an orca trainer. At just 19, Jessica began working at Ocean Haven, starting as an intern while pursuing a degree in marine biology. Her dedication and natural talent quickly set her apart, and within a year she secured a permanent position as part of the training team. By 21, Jessica had achieved what few her age could claim. She had become the lead trainer for Macalo, the park's largest and most popular orca. At 22 feet long and weighing nearly 12,000 pounds, Macalo was the centerpiece of Ocean Haven's 6 weekly orca shows, drawing thousands of visitors each week. Jessica's bond with Macalo was remarkable, with many colleagues noting their unique connection. While other trainers found Macalo challenging at times, Jessica seemed to bring out the best in him. However, troubling signs began to emerge. Macalo started exhibiting erratic behavior, including increased aggression during feeding sessions, refusal to perform commands, and tail slapping against the tank walls. On one occasion, Macalo lunged at a trainer during feeding, forcing them to leap back from the tank. Yet, around Jessica, Macalo remained calm and cooperative, responding to her commands with precision. Believing she had a special ability to manage Macalo, park management decided she should lead all shows involving him, despite concerns raised by other staff members. On the day of a headline show, Ocean Haven was packed with eager visitors. Families filled the stands, children clutching cotton candy as they eagerly awaited the performance. The buzz of excitement was contagious as the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, introducing Jessica and Macalo to roaring applause. Jessica stepped onto the platform with a confidence that belied her years, flashing a bright smile at the audience before signaling Macalo to begin. The performance began smoothly, with Macalo completing his routines flawlessly under Jessica's guidance. The orca's massive dorsal fin sliced through the water as he performed each move with precision, following her commands without hesitation. The crowd erupted in applause when Macalo delivered a breathtaking breach, launching his enormous body out of the water and crashing back down in a spectacular splash that drenched the front rows. Children squealed with delight as waves of water surged into the audience, and parents joined in the applause, captivated by the connection between Jessica and the majestic orca. The finale involved Jessica entering the tank for a synchronized swim routine with Macalo, a signature act that thrilled audiences. As Jessica dove into the water, Macalo circled her in what appeared to be a playful manner. But suddenly, without warning, Macalo lunged, clamping his powerful jaws around Jessica's upper torso. The impact was instant and ferocious, knocking the wind out of her. Gasps and screams erupted from the crowd as they watched Macalo thrash her in the water. The trainers on the platform immediately sprang into action. Emergency signals were triggered and distraction techniques were deployed. They threw buoys, ropes, and even fish into the tank, desperately trying to draw Macalo's attention away from Jessica. 2 trainers prepared to enter the water with poles to attempt a rescue, but the ferocity of Macalo's movements made it impossible to safely intervene. Jessica was held underwater for over a minute as Macalo twisted and thrashed, his immense strength leaving her no chance to escape. The orca's powerful jaws caused catastrophic internal injuries, including fractured ribs, a punctured lung, and massive trauma to her chest. Blood clouded the water as Jessica's limp body was finally released, floating to the surface. Rescue divers pulled Jessica from the tank within seconds, but the damage was too severe. Attempts to resuscitate her on the pool deck failed, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. Her injuries were later confirmed to include severe blunt force trauma and drowning. As the horrifying scene unfolded, staff worked frantically to evacuate the audience. panicked cries echoed through the stands as parents shielded their children from the gruesome sight. Many young visitors, some clutching souvenirs from the show, were left visibly traumatized. Several families hurried out of the stadium while others stood frozen in shock, unable to process the tragedy they had just witnessed. The tragedy sent shockwaves through Ocean Haven and the marine park industry at large. Jessica was widely regarded as one of the most skilled and compassionate trainers at the park, with an unparalleled bond with Makalo. Her death left many questioning how such a tragedy could happen, especially with someone who had the closest relationship to the orca. Was it simply a case of Makalo's wild instincts taking over, or were there warning signs that the park failed to address? Colleagues and visitors mourned Jessica as a dedicated trainer whose life revolved around her love for marine animals. Her family held a private memorial service near the ocean where they remembered her passion, her courage, and her devotion to Makalo. But her death also sparked outrage and debate. Could Ocean Haven have done more to prevent this? Should Makalo's previous erratic behavior had been taken more seriously? And most importantly, should orcas even be kept in captivity at all? Following the incident, Ocean Haven Marine Park permanently shut its gates. The decision was made to relocate Makalo to a newly established marine sanctuary off the coast of Washington State, where he could live out the rest of his life in an enclosed ocean environment with minimal human interaction. While it could never replace the vastness of the open ocean, the sanctuary provided Makalo a chance to live more naturally away from the pressures of performing. In 1965, the world of marine entertainment took a dark turn when Ted Griffin, the owner of the Seattle Marine Aquarium, captured a wild killer whale. This act marked the beginning of a troubling relationship between humans and these magnificent creatures. The crowds flocked to see the spectacle, their excitement palpable as they marveled at the orca's power and grace. However, behind the scenes, a chilling reality unfolded. Within a year, the whale succumbed to the immense stress of captivity, a haunting reminder of the cost of entertainment. Griffin, undeterred by the tragedy, recognized a lucrative opportunity. He transformed the act of capturing orcas into a thriving business model, one that would cast a long shadow over the industry for decades. The methods of capturing these majestic creatures were harrowing. Explosives separated young orcas from their families, creating chaos in the water. Griffin's crew plunged into the turmoil, using massive nets to drag the terrified animals hundreds of miles to shore. The haunting cries of the family members left behind echoed through the ocean, a heart-wrenching testament to the pain inflicted by these captures. But the true tragedy was just beginning. Killer whales are highly intelligent and social animals. In the wild, they form tight-knit family groups, often remaining with their mothers for life. Their deep bonds and complex communication reflect an emotional capacity that few can fathom. Yet, the consequences of captivity began to reveal a darker side to their nature. In 1978, an orca named Kasatka was captured off the coast of Iceland, a young star who dazzled audiences at SeaWorld. However, as the years passed, captivity wore down her spirit. Early signs of aggression emerged, a predictable response from an animal torn from her family and thrust into confinement. As time went on, the tragic stories of orcas in captivity multiplied. Reports surfaced detailing the inhumane conditions these majestic creatures endured. Trainers like Ken Peters, who worked closely with Kasatka, began to notice the toll it was taking on them both. Ken had dedicated his life to training orcas, viewing them as partners in performance. Yet he could no longer ignore the growing risk. Kasatka had bitten him twice, once in 1993 and again in 1999. Each time, he dismissed it as a moment of misunderstanding, a miscommunication between species. Their bond felt profound, and he often marveled at the intelligence of these animals, believing that their connection could overcome the risks. Then came November 30th, 2006, a day that would shatter that illusion. As Ken dove into the water for a routine performance, the anticipation in the audience filled the air. They had come to see a show, but what unfolded was a nightmare. As Ken waited for Kasatka's familiar nudge, he felt a sudden jolt that yanked him beneath the surface. Panic surged through the crowd as they realized something was terribly wrong. Staff members rushed to the edge of the pool, shouting commands, but Kasatka was relentless, dragging Ken deeper into the murky water. Beneath the surface, Ken fought to stay calm, but fear gripped him as he struggled against the powerful orca. He could feel the pressure building in his ears, the weight of the water pressing down on him. Kasatka's grip tightened, her teeth sinking into his foot. Time slowed as Ken's mind raced. This was a moment he had long dreaded. Would this be the end? Instinctively, he reached out, stroking her gently, trying to connect with her. He knew he was at her mercy, and if she turned on him, it would be over in an instant. Then, as if sensing his desperation, Kasatka began to swim toward the surface. Ken gasped for air as she released him slightly, but still held him tightly. The crowd erupted into chaos. He realized he had to fight for his life. As they broke the surface, he heard frantic calls from staff members above, desperately trying to coax Kasatka away. He struggled, summoning every ounce of strength he had to escape her grip. Each moment felt like an eternity. Finally, the staff lowered a net into the water. Ken swam with all his might, panic surging through him. As Kasatka surfaced again, he whispered her name, hoping to reach her with the bond they had built. Miraculously, she responded, swimming toward the net. Seizing the moment, Ken propelled himself toward the edge of the pool, scrambling out onto the concrete, his heart racing. Emerging battered with puncture wounds and a broken foot, Ken's survival felt like a small miracle amid the chaos. The aftermath sent shockwaves through SeaWorld and ignited fierce debates about the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity. Why hadn't anyone seen this coming? Was the industry prepared to confront the consequences of their actions? Kasatka's story didn't end with the attack. She passed away on August 15, 2017 at the age of 41 due to a persistent lung infection attributed to her years in captivity. At her death, she was the oldest orca in captivity, a bittersweet title that highlighted the scars left by a life spent in confinement. Following her passing, SeaWorld pledged to change its approach to orca care, promising to prioritize their well-being over entertainment. The crowd at SeaWorld Orlando leaned forward in their seats, eyes fixed on Dawn Brancheau as she prepared to interact with Tilikum, the massive orca she'd trained for years. Everything seemed in place: the sunlit water, Dawn's confident smile, the rhythmic rise of Tilikum's dorsal fin as he swam nearby. But just beneath that calm surface, an unpredictable force lay waiting. And as Dawn signaled to Tilikum, no one in the crowd could have guessed that they were seconds away from witnessing a tragedy that would forever alter the world of marine shows. Dawn Brancheau had dreamed of working with orcas ever since she was 10. A family trip to SeaWorld had changed her life, igniting a passion for these immense, graceful creatures. Her journey from that wide-eyed little girl to one of SeaWorld's star trainers spanned years of dedication, education, and sheer hard work. Now, as a leading figure in SeaWorld's Shamu show, she'd become a face of the park, respected for her skill and the close bond she had with the orcas. For more than 16 years, Dawn had been a beloved trainer, her performances drawing massive crowds, each captivated by her seeming harmony with some of the ocean's most formidable animals. But among the orcas, Tilikum was different. Standing over 22 feet long and weighing nearly 12,000 pounds, he was the largest orca in captivity. His history was dark, marred by troubling incidents, yet he had spent years with SeaWorld, part of their most popular shows. With a history stretching back to the icy waters off Iceland, Tilikum had been captured as a 2-year-old and transported into a world confined by walls and schedules. Though his size made him impressive to watch, it also brought challenges. as he struggled with limited space and social isolation from other orcas. Despite his reputation, Don had worked closely with him for years, building a careful routine and familiarity that made their bond appear seamless to onlookers. It was February 24, 2010, during SeaWorld's popular Dine with Shamu event. Dawn lay flat on her stomach by the tank's edge, signaling Tilikum to approach. It was a routine she'd practiced hundreds of times, her long ponytail trailing down, a signal he recognized well. To the audience, it was another thrilling moment, a breathtaking glimpse into the connection between human and creature. But in a sudden, chilling twist, the familiar turned deadly. Without warning, Tilikum grabbed Dawn's ponytail in his jaws and yanked her into the water. A gasp spread through the audience, some assuming it was part of the show, others feeling a chill of unease. Trainers watching from nearby knew immediately something was wrong. Tilikum's grip was unyielding as he pulled Dawn deeper, his massive body moving with a raw power that was impossible to counter. Dawn fought with everything she had, her experience and strength no match for the orca's sheer force. As she struggled to surface, Tilikum slammed her against the walls of the tank, his actions relentless and terrifying. Every command and cue thrown his way went ignored, the signals he'd responded to countless times seeming to fall on deaf ears. Tilikum was beyond reach, lost to a primal instinct that had been held at bay for years. Each second became an agonizing eternity as Dawn tried to break free, only to be pulled back, tossed, and battered. The onlookers' shock turned to horror as the water grew red and cries began to fill the stadium. Trainers desperately worked to distract Tilikum, slapping the water and throwing emergency signals. But he wouldn't release his grip, locked in a terrifying fury. Dawn's injuries were catastrophic. In those brutal moments, her spine was severed, her ribs broken, and her left arm and scalp torn. Her body went limp, yet Tilikum continued to thrash her, his hold unyielding even as she was beyond help. It took over 30 minutes to finally retrieve her body. The horrified crowd, paralyzed by shock, began to realize they were witnessing one of the darkest moments in SeaWorld's history. A moment that would forever alter the world of marine animal entertainment. As Dawn's lifeless body was finally retrieved from the tank, a stunned silence spread through the stadium, interrupted only by quiet sobs from witnesses and murmurs from onlookers. Trainers, many who had known Dawn for years, stood shaken, grieving the loss of a beloved colleague. In the hours that followed, SeaWorld staff moved swiftly to close the park, guiding guests out and setting up barriers around the area. Emergency responders arrived, and officials from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration launched an investigation, beginning a deeper scrutiny that would shake the marine park industry. The public reacted immediately. News outlets worldwide reported on Dawn's tragic end, and as details emerged, the pattern of incidents became undeniable. Tilikum had been involved in 2 prior fatalities. In 1991, a young trainer at Sealand of the Pacific died in a similar incident, and later in 1999, a man who had entered Tilikum's tank after hours was found dead, his body battered by the orca. These previous events, previously downplayed, now resurfaced under a critical lens as the public demanded answers. SeaWorld temporarily halted its orca shows, initiating internal reviews and adding stricter protocols to prevent further tragedies. Orcas are not limited to attacks within entertainment parks. They also strike in the open sea, targeting boats, kayakers, and others who venture into their territory. In recent years, there have been numerous terrifying incidents involving these powerful animals as they confront those entering their ocean domain. Now, let's dive into our next story, where a boat became the target of an orca attack. On September 30th, 2018, Manuel and Sofia Costa, along with their children Mateo and Ana, set out for an afternoon boat ride off the coast of Sagres, Portugal. The family had sailed in this area many times before without incident. Their boat, a small but sturdy sailboat, was well equipped for the coastal waters they navigated, and they anticipated a peaceful outing. Manuel, a seasoned sailor with over 15 years of experience navigating Portugal's coastlines, was confident in his ability to handle the waters. Sophia, who had always shared his love of the sea, enjoyed the calm and beauty of the ocean, especially when it allowed the family to spend time together. Mateo, the couple's 8-year-old son, was already an avid fisherman, while his younger sister Ana loved learning about marine life. Together they had made countless memories on the water, never imagining that this would be the day their peaceful routine would turn into a disaster. Around midday, while cruising several miles from shore, Mateo was the first to spot dorsal fins cutting through the water. He identified them immediately as orcas. Although orcas are present in the Atlantic, sightings in this region are relatively rare but still not unheard of. The family had no idea, however, that the orca's behavior would soon escalate. The first sign that something was wrong came when one of the orcas swam alongside the boat at an unusually close distance. Manuel attempted to steer the boat away from the animals, concerned that their proximity might be a sign of territorial behavior or aggression. The situation took a dangerous turn when one of the orcas rammed the side of the sailboat. The impact sent a jolt through the boat, splashing water onto the deck and damaging the hull. The orca continued to target the boat's rudder, focusing its strikes on that part of the vessel. The orca struck repeatedly, and with each blow, the boat rocked heavily. The rudder became completely ineffective, leaving Manuel unable to steer the boat. Then, in a coordinated attack, 2 orcas surged toward the boat's side, ramming it simultaneously. The force sent the boat tilting sharply to one side, water rushing over the deck as the crew struggled to maintain their balance. The boat's stability faltered, and the overwhelming pressure made it feel as though it could tip at any moment. The orcas circled, waiting for another opportunity to strike, their movements precise and calculated. As water began to flood the lower deck, Manuel and his wife Sophia were in complete panic. Sophia was frozen in shock, consumed by the fear that the entire boat would sink. Manuel, realizing the urgency of the situation, snapped into action and quickly sent out a mayday signal, providing their location and requesting immediate assistance. A nearby Coast Guard rescue vessel arrived within minutes. As it approached, the orcas gradually ceased their ramming behavior and dispersed into the open water. The family was safely transferred to the rescue vehicle, and the damaged sailboat was left to drift until it could be towed back to shore. Despite the extensive damage to the hull and rudder, the family was not injured. Experts believe that while attacks are rare, they're becoming more frequent in certain areas, and boaters in regions where orcas are known to frequent are advised to exercise caution. Authorities continue to monitor the situation closely, but no regulations have been enacted to restrict access to these waters. The rise in boat orca interactions has sparked discussions about marine safety measures. For the Costa family, this incident highlighted the immense force of nature and the unpredictable behavior of wildlife. While they returned home safely, the event raised concerns among locals and marine experts about the growing number of orca interactions with boats in the region. On March 15, 2020, Juan Martinez and his crew ventured out in their small trawler into the Strait of Gibraltar, where the Atlantic meets the Mediterranean. The strait is a place of immense power, a narrow passage where strong currents sweep through deep, mysterious waters. Juan and his team, experienced fishermen familiar with these waters, knew the risks of fishing here, where unpredictable weather and turbulent seas could turn any outing into a challenge. But that day they would face something far more terrifying than any storm. The morning had been calm, and the fishermen headed deeper into the strait, scanning the horizon and setting their equipment. The boat, modest but reliable, carried 5 men. Juan Martinez, the seasoned captain, his first mate Miguel Garcia, the veteran fisherman Sergio Lopez, the younger but experienced Carlos Sanchez, and the newcomer Luis Herrera, who had joined the crew just a few months before. Each had witnessed the forces of the sea firsthand, but nothing could have prepared them for what was about to happen. They worked quickly, preparing nets and lines, unaware that beneath the surface, powerful predators were watching. Around midday, Sergio spotted sleek shapes moving through the water nearby. At first, they thought it might be dolphins, common enough in these waters, but as the tall black dorsal fins cut through the waves, they realized these were orcas. Imposing, intelligent, and rarely seen up close. The crew exchanged looks, a mixture of surprise and curiosity, reaching for their phones and cameras to capture the rare sight. But the orcas weren't there to perform. Almost as if coordinated, the pod began to circle the boat, drawing closer with deliberate precision. The fishermen noticed the orcas continuing their close inspection as the animals circled the boat. Then, without warning, one of the orcas surged forward and rammed the hull with alarming force, jolting the boat and nearly knocking the men off their feet. The crew scrambled to hold on as the orcas began a calculated assault, striking the boat's rudder repeatedly with precision. The rudder jammed, and without any way to steer, the fishermen found themselves drifting, their boat at the mercy of the orcas. Each strike sent a shudder through the vessel, loosening bolts and cracking parts of the hull. Water began to pour into the lower deck as the boat's structure weakened under the relentless hits, creating panic among the crew. They sent out a mayday call, providing their location and describing the situation. With each passing minute, the situation grew more desperate. Then came a strike so powerful the boat lurched violently, tipping to one side. Two of the fishermen, Carlos and Luis, were thrown off balance and flung overboard into the cold, churning waters of the strait. Their frantic shouts resounded in the air as they struggled to stay afloat, drawing the orcas' attention. The remaining crew tossed life vests to their overboard friends while working to stabilize the boat. The orcas circled the men in the water, their sleek bodies cutting through the waves as Carlos and Luis clung to their life vests, desperately trying to keep their heads above water. After a long wait, the sound of approaching engines signaled the arrival of the Coast Guard, their vessel cutting through the waves toward the stricken fishing boat. As the Coast Guard pulled alongside, the orcas disappeared, their dark shapes vanishing beneath the waves as suddenly as they had appeared. The Coast Guard team pulled Carlos and Luis from the water and boarded the trawler to assess the damage. The boat, partially submerged with its rudder destroyed, was no longer seaworthy and would need extensive repairs. For as long as she could remember, Emily Cadeau had been captivated by the powerful, enigmatic presence of orcas. Each summer, she would visit Blue Waters Marine Park, drawn by the deep bond between trainers and the ocean's largest predators. Over the years, her bedroom walls became covered with posters of animals she loved, and her fascination grew stronger with each visit. Her childhood dream was clear. One day she would stand among her heroes, working side by side with these majestic creatures. Blue Waters Marine Park was a renowned facility that showcased the beauty of marine life while championing conservation. Through captivating performances and interactive exhibits, it inspired countless children to dream big and nurtured a passion for marine animals, encouraging many to pursue careers in marine biology and animal training. Emily was one of those children, her dreams shaped by the wonders she witnessed there. Now, at 28, she had achieved her dream, standing on the platform at Blue Waters Marine Park where her mentors had once stood. With nearly a decade of experience, she was now one of the park's most skilled trainers. Her bond with Nayar, the park's star orca, was strong, built on countless hours of practice, patience, and trust. Blue Waters felt more like a home to Emily than any place on land. Her friends often joked that she practically lived at the park, and in truth it was almost accurate. Nayar in particular was at the center of her world. However, in recent weeks, Emily had noticed subtle changes in Nayar's behavior. It wasn't anything overt, just small signs that only someone who knew her well would catch. Nayar seemed slightly more restless and somewhat distant. That morning, Emily shared her concerns with her team, expressing unease over the orca's mood. They reassured her that it was likely nothing serious, just a passing phase. Though comforted by their words, Emily found it hard to push her worries aside, hoping the show would go smoothly as always. Little did she know, her concerns would prove well-founded, though the realization would come far too late. Orcas, or killer whales, are magnificent yet untamable creatures of the sea, their intelligence matched by a raw power that few animals can rival. Known as apex predators, they hunt seals, fish, and even other whales with incredible precision. In the wild, orcas roam hundreds of miles, navigating the ocean's depths with an independence that captivates and commands respect. Trainers understand this well, recognizing that the orca's wild nature always lurks beneath the surface. Yet, amidst the daily routines and familiar interactions, it's easy to forget that these beautiful animals are not merely performers. They are wild beings capable of instinct and strength that no amount of training can fully contain. The performance began without a hitch. Nayar moved through her opening routines gracefully, leaping high into the air and splashing back down with a force that sent waves crashing across the tank. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Emily felt a flicker of relief. Perhaps she had just been overthinking things. But as the show went on, an uneasy feeling settled in. Nayar's movements became sharper, unpredictable in a way that set Emily's nerves on edge. Only she could see it. The crowd was oblivious, caught up in the excitement, but something felt off. Nayar was circling faster than usual, her dorsal fin cutting through the water with a speed that made Emily uneasy. Finally, they reached the finale. It was their signature move, and the crowd always loved it. Emily dove into the tank, plunging into the cool water as the audience's cheers surged around her. As she descended, the familiar thrill of the performance took over, and she signaled to Nayar to join her. Nayar swam close, her massive shadow passing beneath Emily, closer than usual. Emily reached out a hand, signaling Nayar to back up slightly. Then, before she could fully register what was happening, Nayar's behavior took a frightening turn. In an instant, Nayar's massive 21-foot, 11,500-pound body surged forward, and before Emily could react, the orca's powerful jaws clamped down on her leg. The grip was fierce, an overwhelming strength that dragged her downward with brutal force. The water exploded into chaos as Nayar pulled Emily deeper, twisting and thrashing. Panic surged, but her training kicked in as she tried to free herself, her mind racing even as she felt the icy sting of pain shoot through her leg. Blood began to cloud the water around them as Nayar's grip tightened. In the stands, the crowd's cheers turned to gasps, then horrified screams as the reality of the situation dawned on them. Emily's parents were there, watching, their joy shattered as they saw her struggle. Her mother's voice broke through the noise, her cries frantic and helpless. Along the edge of the tank, trainers sprang into action, throwing ropes, shouting commands, and trying to reach Emily. But it was clear that nothing was breaking through Nayar's grip. Emily's movement slowed as her strength faded. She reached toward the surface, her hand breaking through for a brief, desperate moment before Nayar pulled her back under. The water around them was dark now, tinged red as Emily's fight weakened. The orca continued to thrash, her body moving with a terrifying, relentless power that left the trainers on the edge of the tank frozen with helplessness. Then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. Nayar released her grip, and Emily's body floated slowly toward the surface. Rescue divers reached her within seconds, pulling her limp form from the tank, but it was already too late. The audience was silent, the park blanketed in shock. What had started as a joyful display had ended in tragedy, and the news of Emily Cadeau's death spread quickly, casting a long shadow over Blue Waters. In the days that followed, Blue Waters Marine Park shut down all Orca performances, and the gates eventually closed for good. Emily's friends and family held a quiet memorial by the ocean honoring the life of a woman who had dedicated herself to the animal she loved. Her parents, heartbroken, shared stories of her passion, and her friends stood in silence, grappling with the loss of someone so young, so full of life. Often, when incidents occur in marine parks, the focus is on the people involved. However, the real question lies with the orcas themselves. Taken from their natural ocean habitats and forced into captivity, they're often subjected to terrible conditions leading to immense suffering. This was the harsh reality faced by Keiko the orca, whose story we will explore next. Keiko was born in the wild off the coast of Iceland around September 24, 1976. He was just a toddler when his world was violently upended. In 1979, a whaler named Joe Gunnarsson and his team, working for the whaling company, attacked Keiko's family. The orcapod, which had likely roamed the cold waters of the North Atlantic for generations, was torn apart, and Keiko was captured. At only 3 years old, he was taken to a small aquarium in Iceland, far from the ocean and family he knew. He was given the name Sigi, and eventually Keiko, the name he would carry through the rest of his tumultuous life. Keiko's early years in captivity were nothing short of distressing. His new home, a tiny, barren tank at a theme park near a remote town in Iceland, was a far cry from the vast open waters of his homeland. As he grew, his living conditions worsened. The small, confined space did little to accommodate his natural instincts and behavior. For years, Keiko performed tricks for audiences, living a life of entertainment that starkly contrasted his life in the wild. Despite the apparent cheerfulness of the shows, something was deeply wrong. Keiko was far from home, his health deteriorating, and the calls for his release grew louder. In 1982, after his time in Iceland, Keiko was sold to Marineland in Ontario, Canada. There, he was thrust into a larger facility, performing for bigger crowds. Yet, the challenges continued. His skin began to show signs of stress, developing painful lesions likely caused by the poor conditions and chemicals in the water. Keiko struggled to fit in with the older female orcas in the facility, as he had not been part of their pod from the beginning. His attempts to interact were met with aggression, and he became a solitary, broken creature. Marineland, unable to address the issue, sold him again in 1985. Keiko's new home was Reno Aventura in Mexico City. The conditions here were perhaps the worst yet. At only 10 feet long, he was housed in a tank built for dolphins, a far cry from the space he needed. His growing body, now reaching 21 feet, barely fit in the cramped enclosure. The tank was only 65 feet wide and 22 feet deep. The water temperature was far warmer than Keiko could tolerate, and the tank was filled with chlorine, a harsh chemical that irritated his skin. To save money, the park owners used salt water instead of natural seawater, further exacerbating his condition. Keiko was forced to perform up to 5 times a day despite his deteriorating health. He was a showpiece, a commodity that earned money but at the cost of his well-being. Despite the harsh environment, Keiko remained gentle. His spirit, though fractured by years of captivity, still showed remarkable resilience and compassion. In 1993, Keiko's life changed forever when he became the star of Free Willy. The film told the heartwarming story of a young boy named Jesse who fought to free his captive orca friend, Willy. Keiko's portrayal of Willy resonated deeply with audiences worldwide, transforming him from an anonymous captive orca into a global symbol of hope and freedom for marine animals. The film's powerful message struck a nerve, but it also divided opinions. For many, Free Willy was an inspiring tale that celebrated the bond between humans and animals, sparking a wave of admiration for orcas like Keiko. However, others saw the movie as deeply troubling, believing it highlighted the very exploitation it sought to condemn. Critics argued that using a real captive orca to tell a story about freedom was ironic if not devastating, and called attention to the ethics of keeping such intelligent creatures in captivity for entertainment. Keiko's real-life story mirrored Willie's in many ways, further deepening the public's emotional connection to him. This connection sparked an unprecedented movement. Over 300,000 people called, wrote letters, and signed petitions demanding Keiko's release. To them, Keiko had become more than just a movie star, he was the living embodiment of the freedom Willie achieved on screen. But while the world rallied around him, the harsh truth about Keiko's life painted a far darker picture. Far from the vibrant, playful creature portrayed in Free Willy, Keiko was severely overweight by the time the movie hit theaters. His lesions had worsened, he had developed stomach ulcers, and his immune system was compromised. He was barely able to perform. Even the $75,000 he earned for his role in the film, a sum that could have provided much-needed care, was pocketed by his owners instead of being used to help him. Yet the calls for his release continued, and soon a solution began to form. In 1995, the Free Willy Keiko Foundation was established. Led by Warner Brothers and the International Marine Mammal Project, the foundation worked tirelessly to raise funds for Keiko's freedom. Over $7 million was raised, with contributions coming from generous benefactors and millions of school children. With this money, a plan was set in motion to rehabilitate Keiko and, if possible, return him to the wild. In January 1996, Keiko was moved from Mexico to the Oregon Coast Aquarium in Newport, Oregon. For the first time in his life, Keiko lived in a tank with seawater, and conditions were significantly better. He stayed there for 8 months, regaining some of his strength he had lost during his years of captivity. His weight increased and he became healthier, but the ultimate goal was to prepare him for his return to the wild. Preparations for Keiko's release began in earnest in 1998. On September 9th, he was flown to Kivik Bay, a small island off the coast of Iceland. Keiko's rehabilitation was a careful, gradual process. He was trained to swim long distances and to learn how to hunt for food on his own. He was fitted with a satellite transmitter, and supervised swims in the open ocean began. Keiko was learning to become the orca he had once been, reconnecting with his natural instincts. After 17 long years in captivity, Keiko was ready for the ocean. In the summer of 2002, the moment everyone had waited for arrived. Keiko was released into the wild off the coast of Iceland. It was a historic event, the first time a captive orca was returned to the open ocean. Initially, Keiko swam freely in the open waters, spotted in the bay for days. But as the weeks passed, something unexpected occurred. Keiko, despite his newfound freedom, still sought out human company. He remained close to the bay, often interacting with people. Although he sometimes swam with wild orcas, he never fully integrated with them. In December 2003, Keiko, now 27 years old, was found swimming in the bay in Norway when he succumbed to pneumonia. His passing was the tragic end of a long, complex journey, one that had started with hope but was ultimately too much for him to overcome. It was 1965 when a remarkable event occurred off the coast of British Columbia near a small town called Namu. A young orca, tangled in a massive salmon net, was pulled from the ocean and into a world far removed from the wild waters he knew. His name was Namu, and his story would soon become one of the most controversial chapters in the history of orca captivity. Namu's life began as a member of the C1 pod, part of the northern resident orca community that had thrived for centuries in the Pacific Northwest. However, fate would soon take a darker turn. Discovered by a fisherman named William Lacobie, Namu was sold to Ted Griffin, the owner of the Seattle Marine Aquarium. Griffin saw a lucrative opportunity, not just to house the orca, but to turn him into the star of large shows, drawing in crowds, earning big money, and selling tickets. And so, Namu's tragic journey from the wild to captivity was set in motion. What followed would both captivate and horrify the world. Upon arriving in Seattle, Namu quickly became the star attraction at Griffin's Aquarium. For the first time, the world had the chance to witness a live orca up close and personal. His playful behavior, his massive size, and his unflinching companionship with Griffin painted a picture of the killer whale as a gentle giant, a stark contrast to the wild and dangerous creatures often depicted in the media. Namu's presence sparked a wave of public fascination, and the once feared orca became a beloved icon. But what the public didn't see was the price Namu paid for this newfound fame. As his popularity grew, so did the pressures to perform. Namu, now confined to a small pen in Seattle's Pier 56, was subjected to daily routines that were far from natural. He was fed 400 pounds of salmon every day, but his captivity took a toll on his health. The once mighty killer whale who had roamed the open sea was now reduced to a spectacle. Still, Namu's bond with Griffin was undeniable. Their connection, at times seemingly telepathic, captured the imagination of millions. But what the public didn't know was the dark reality behind Namu's life in captivity. In 1966, just before the premiere of Namu, My Best Friend, the orca passed away. The film, released that same year, told a heartwarming and idealized story of a man and his heroic orca. It follows marine biologist Hank Donner, who discovers a wounded orca, later named Namu, stranded on the shore of the Pacific Northwest. The plot centers around Hank's fight to protect Namu from local fishermen, who view the orca as a threat to their livelihood. As the townspeople attempt to harm him, Hank swims with Namu to prove the orca's peaceful nature, ultimately earning the trust of both the animal and the town. The film played a significant role in shifting public perceptions of killer whales, casting them as majestic creatures worthy of protection rather than fear. Behind the scenes, however, Namu's life was far darker. An autopsy revealed he had been suffering from several illnesses, including a bacterial infection, skin rashes, and a stomach infection likely caused by sewage runoff in Elliott Bay, where he had been relocated. Namu's death was tragic, not only because of the suffering he endured, but also because it exposed the hidden consequences of human fascination with these animals. While the movie was meant to showcase the bond between Namu and his human counterparts, the reality was far more sinister. The film painted a picture of an orca who willingly played with children, who protected his human friends from harm. But in truth, Namu's life had been anything but idyllic. He was confined to a small pen, isolated from his family, and forced to perform for the entertainment of others. The film's release, which should have been a celebration of Namu's life, was instead overshadowed by the painful reality of his death. The public outpouring of grief following Namu's death was immense. Thousands mourned the loss of the orca who had captured their hearts. However, Namu's death also sparked an important conversation about the ethics of keeping killer whales in captivity. In the years that followed, the world began to question whether the price of human entertainment was worth the suffering of these magnificent creatures. Ted Griffin, who had once seen Namu as a companion, was left to grapple with the consequences of his actions. While he had introduced the world to orcas as intelligent, emotional creatures, he had also played a part in their exploitation. Griffin would later go on to advocate for the release of captive orcas, but the damage had been done. Namu's story had served as a harsh reminder that humans had underestimated the needs and complexities of the animals they sought to control. Today, Namu's name is remembered not just as a movie title, but as a symbol of the change he helped bring about. While the film may have told a fairy tale of a human-orca friendship, the reality of Namu's life was far more complex. His death was a tragic reminder that entertainment should never come at the cost of an animal's well-being. It was July 8, 2002 at SeaWorld San Diego, a place where families gathered to watch marine life perform. Among the trainers was Tamari Tollison, a dedicated 28-year-old who had always dreamed of working with orcas. With years of experience under her belt, she felt a deep connection to the animals, especially two orcas named Orchid and Splash. This day began like any other, with trainers preparing for the afternoon show. Tamari walked to Shamu Stadium feeling the familiar thrill of anticipation. The stadium was packed, families eagerly awaiting the performance. Children pointed excitedly at the water, while parents settled into their seats with cameras in hand. Tamari loved sharing her passion for marine life, educating the audience about the orca's intelligence and grace. However, both orcas had histories that hinted at danger. Splash, originally named Katak, was born with health challenges including epilepsy. In 1995, he suffered a seizure that resulted in severe injuries, including damage to his jaw. Despite his resilience, the scars of his past served as a reminder of the hidden risks in training orcas. Orchid, a hybrid orca, also had a troubled background. Born at SeaWorld, she witnessed her mother's death during a performance, which shaped her behavior. In 2006, she attacked another trainer, pulling him underwater for nearly half a minute. These incidents were often overlooked in favor of entertainment, a horrific mistake that would later prove to be wrong. As the show began, Tamari signaled to Orchid and Splash. The audience watched in awe as the orcas leaped and splashed, demonstrating their training and agility. Each performance was a culmination of countless hours of practice, and Tamari felt immense pride watching her beloved orcas showcase their skills. Splash executed a perfect breach, sending a cascade of water over the edge of the pool, eliciting cheers from the crowd. However, as the routine continued, Tamari sensed a change in the water. The atmosphere shifted, and the behavior of the orcas became increasingly erratic. Orchid and Splash displayed signs of agitation, swimming closer together, creating ripples in the water that spoke of unease. Tamari furrowed her brow, trying to gauge what was troubling them. Perhaps it was the noise from the crowd, or maybe the heat of the day was making them uncomfortable. Determined to maintain control, Tamari attempted to redirect their attention with commands and gestures she had practiced countless times before. But today was different. The orcas seemed unresponsive to her signals, and their movements grew more aggressive. The excitement of the audience shifted to murmurs of confusion and concern. Tamari's heart raced as she watched the orcas circle in the water, their bodies tense and focused on one another. Then, without warning, Orchid lunged up from the water. Tamari barely had time to react as the massive orca clamped down on her foot, dragging her into the pool. A gasp rippled through the crowd, and panic set in as the screams of the audience echoed around the stadium. In an instant, Tamari was submerged, her body caught in the grip of a creature she had devoted her life to training. The water swirled around her as she struggled against the overwhelming force of Orchid's bite. Tamari's heart raced as she felt the cold water engulf her. She kicked and thrashed, her screams muffled beneath the surface. It was chaos. The other trainers on the platform shouted, desperately trying to pull her to safety. One trainer, Robin Sheet, recognized the danger and made a quick decision. She rushed to the adjoining pool, releasing a more dominant female orca named Kasaka, hoping the new arrival would disrupt the aggression between Orchid and Tamari. The moment Kasaka entered the tank, the dynamic shifted. Orchid released her grip and Tamari found her way to the surface, gasping for air. She had sustained severe injuries during the attack, including a compound fracture in her forearm. The shock of the incident left her shaken and in pain, but she was alive. As she reached the edge of the pool, fellow trainers pulled her up, their faces pale with fear. Tamari was rushed to the hospital where doctors treated her arm injuries. Medical staff worked quickly to assess the damage. As they treated her, reports of the incident began to emerge, detailing the performance and the unexpected attack that occurred in the water. This incident marked a turning point for SeaWorld. Videos circulated drawing attention to the dangers trainers faced while working with orcas. The event sparked debates about the ethics of keeping such intelligent creatures in captivity for entertainment. Tamari's experience was not just an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a larger issue regarding the treatment of marine mammals. Tamari's recovery was long and painful, with visible scars and lingering emotional trauma. When she returned to SeaWorld, fear and doubt replaced her joy, making her question the safety of her environment and the treatment of the orcas she loved. Despite the trauma, Tamari became a voice for change within the organization. She advocated for revised safety protocols, emphasizing the need for trainers to prioritize their well-being and the well-being of the animals. The attack raised broader questions about the nature of captivity. Advocates argue that orcas like Orchid and Splash deserve to live in environments that mimicked their natural habitats. As time passed, SeaWorld faced increasing scrutiny over its practices. The documentary Blackfish brought national attention to the issues surrounding captive orcas, featuring Tamari's harrowing experience. Public perception shifted, and discussions about the ethics of marine parks gained momentum. While Tamari survived the attack, the scars of that day served as a haunting reminder of the dangers trainers face. On May 12, 2024, the Marisol, a luxury 40-foot yacht, departed from the marina in Malaga, Spain, carrying a group of wealthy business partners. The yacht, owned by Alex Vargas, a high-profile entrepreneur in the luxury real estate market, was designed for high-end clients and meetings. Joining him on the trip were his associates William Armitage, a tech mogul, and Veronica Hayes, a real estate investor. The group was on a business retreat, planning to discuss their expansion into new markets across Europe and the Middle East. The yacht's sleek design and opulent amenities reflected their immense wealth, setting the stage for an ideal business getaway. Orcas, or killer whales, are the largest members of the dolphin family and are known for their immense size and power. Adult males can grow up to 32 feet long and weigh as much as 22,000 pounds, while females are slightly smaller, typically reaching lengths of around 28 feet and weighing up to 16,000 pounds. The sheer size and strength of these predators enable them to take down many kinds of prey, from seals to even whales, and their coordinated hunting strategies show their remarkable intelligence. Their size and predatory nature make orcas one of the ocean's most terrifying and awe-inspiring inhabitants. How would these enormous creatures react to a man-made vessel on the open water? The Marisol sliced through the calm Mediterranean waters, the warm breeze filling the sails as the crew kept the boat steady. The atmosphere was relaxed, with the team discussing strategies and enjoying fine wines as they navigated further into the Strait of Gibraltar. As they sailed, the captain, Miguel, a seasoned mariner with over 20 years of experience navigating the strait, kept a careful eye on the horizon. The strait was known for its busy shipping lanes, but Miguel was used to these waters and the occasional encounter with marine life. It wasn't long before a disturbance in the water caught the crew's attention, several dorsal fins slicing through the surface. William's keen interest in marine life had him lean forward in excitement, but as the creatures approached, the tension on board began to rise. The orcas didn't simply swim past. They began to circle, closing in on the Marisol. The captain, noticing the orca's strange behavior, took immediate action, adjusting the yacht's course to avoid any close encounters. But as he steered, one of the orcas veered directly toward the boat, suddenly slamming into the hull with a deafening impact. The yacht rocked violently and the crew staggered to regain their balance. Before anyone could react, the orca rammed the boat again, this time targeting the stern. The crew clung to the railing as the yacht lurched from side to side. The powerful hits from the orca sent tremors through the vessel, and the damage began to become evident. Miguel fought to keep the boat on course, but the rudder was damaged, leaving him struggling to steer. Water splashed over the edge as the Marisol listed dangerously to one side, and the orcas continued their relentless ramming. With each strike, the yacht grew more unstable. Miguel shouted for the crew to head below deck for safety, but the attacks were relentless. The yacht's hull groaned as another orca slammed into it, its massive body sending the boat spinning in the water. Panic spread through the passengers as the boat became harder to control. The crew could see the damage mounting, the yacht's once sleek exterior now battered and torn. Water continued to flood the deck, and Miguel knew they needed help. He reached out for the radio and sent out a mayday signal, providing their coordinates and describing the ongoing assault. Meanwhile, the orcas showed no signs of stopping. They continued their precise, calculated strikes on the yacht, focusing on the rudder and incapacitating the yacht's ability to steer further. The Marisol was now at the mercy of the Orca's attacks, trapped in a violent cycle. After what seemed like an eternity, a nearby rescue vessel appeared on the horizon. The Orcas, their interest in the yacht seemingly exhausted, began to retreat into the deep water. The captain of the rescue boat maneuvered expertly to approach the damaged Marisol, and the crew was quickly evacuated onto the rescue vessel. Miguel and his passengers, shaken but unharmed, watched as the yacht was towed back toward the shore. The Marisol, once a symbol of wealth and luxury, now sat battered and damaged, its hull marked with deep gashes from the Orca's attack. As the crew returned to land, they could only speculate on why the Orcas had singled out their boat. No one had ever experienced such a sustained, focused assault from Orcas in the region. Some suggested territorial behavior or frustration with boat traffic in the area. Others thought it might have been a rare act of aggression or play, though the precise reason remained unclear. Whatever the cause, the attack had been swift and fierce. The business retreat, meant to be a peaceful and productive trip, had turned into a traumatic ordeal. The Marisol would need extensive repairs, and the incident would be talked about for months to come as a reminder of the unpredictable power of the ocean and the creatures that call it home. As the Marisol limped back to shore, battered by the Orca attacks, the crew was left with unsettling questions. The Orcas had relentlessly rammed the boat, leaving it crippled and the passengers terrified. Our next story takes us to northern Spain, where a kayaker, attacked by a pod of orcas, was thrown into the sea. Would he survive amidst the crushing power of some of the ocean's most fearsome predators? On August 26, 2024, Antonio Garcia, a 32-year-old kayaker, launched his kayak from a beach near the cliffs of Rías Baixas, Galicia, for a routine paddle along the coast of northern Spain. Garcia was familiar with the area's marine life and conditions. On this particular day, the sea was calm, with clear skies and moderate winds. He paddled several miles from shore, heading toward the open Atlantic. Antonio had spent most of his life exploring the waters of Rías Baixas, Galicia. Growing up in a small coastal village, he had always felt a deep connection to the ocean. His father, a fisherman, had taught him to respect the sea from an early age, and it was on these very waters that Antonio learned the value of patience, persistence, and understanding the rhythms of nature. His kayak was not just a means of exploration, it was his way of connecting with the environment he had always loved and worked to preserve. At approximately 11 a.m., while kayaking in open waters, Antonio noticed a pod of orcas in the distance. The orcas, which had been spotted in the region before, appeared to be swimming parallel to his path. The pod, estimated to number 6 or 7 individuals, each weighing up to 13,200 pounds and reaching lengths of up to 26 feet, began to circle around him, displaying coordinated movements. Their behavior seemed different from the typical passive encounters that had been observed in the area. As the orcas drew closer, one of them made a direct approach toward Antonio's kayak. Without warning, the orca collided with the side of the kayak, sending Antonio into the water. The strike was forceful enough to disrupt the balance of the kayak, but did not damage it beyond repair. Following the collision, the pod of orcas dispersed rapidly, disappearing into the open sea. Antonio quickly surfaced and swam back toward his kayak, gripping the edge and pulling himself back into position. Before he could fully stabilize himself, another orca approached, this one attempting to flip the kayak with a powerful push. The kayak rocked violently, but the orca's strike failed to overturn it. The kayak righted itself and Antonio regained his balance. The orcas, having lost interest, stopped circling and swam away, disappearing into the open sea. Antonio regained control of his kayak and continued paddling without further incident. The entire encounter lasted less than 5 minutes. While Antonio was unharmed, the force of the strike left him shaken. The orcas showed no further signs of aggression after the initial attack, and the water settled once the pod moved away. This encounter took place during a period of heightened orca activity in the region. Reports from earlier in 2024 noted an increase in interactions between orcas and vessels in the Strait of Gibraltar and surrounding waters. Marine biologists have speculated that such behaviors could be linked to territorial disputes, frustration from boat traffic, or even play. This encounter with Antonio was in line with a broader trend of orcas exhibiting unusual behaviors around boats and kayaks. The incident is a shocking example of the unpredictable power of orca behavior in the wild. Though orca attacks on humans are rare, their interactions with boats and kayaks have raised significant questions about the causes behind these incidents. Antonio's brief but intense encounter brings to light the need for caution and respect when navigating the waters shared with these powerful creatures. Hugo's story unfolds with a somber inevitability, beginning as he took his first breath in the open ocean of the Pacific Northwest. It was 1965, and Hugo was born into a pod of southern resident killer whales, roaming vast waters, thriving in the rhythms of the wild. Little could he know that just 3 years later, his life would forever be altered, taken from his family and his ocean home. Hugo's capture occurred in 1968 in the cold waters of Warren Bay, Washington. A powerful orca calf, only 3 years old, he was wrested from his family's side and transported over 3,000 miles to a world far removed from the one he knew. This concrete enclosure, named the Celebrity Bowl, would be Hugo's new reality. Here, he became a spectacle, a captive performer for thousands of visitors who marveled at his size and strength, unaware of the confinement and isolation eating away at his spirit. The Celebrity Bowl was no substitute for the open ocean. Hugo's tank was small, his world reduced to a fraction of what his kind was meant to roam. Each performance drew in eager crowds, captivated by the sight of Hugo, a glimpse of the ocean's wild majesty behind glass. But what they didn't see was the desperation building within him. Richard O'Barry, Hugo's trainer, saw the impact of captivity firsthand. In Behind the Dolphin's Smile, he captured the heartbreaking scene. When I fed Hugo, his tail would be lying on the bottom and his head would be completely out of the water. It was pathetic. They wanted me to train him. I refused and left in disgust. Though Hugo became a staple of the aquarium, each show masked a painful truth. Those quirks weren't for entertainment. They were signs of a mind fraying under strain. With every passing day, Hugo grew closer to the breaking point, an outcome that would shock everyone, yet in some way felt tragically inevitable. In the early 1970s, the aquarium paired Hugo with a new companion, Lolita, another orca taken from the ocean, who had similarly lost her family to captivity. Their bond was undeniable. Lolita brought Hugo the comfort of companionship he had long missed, and the two orcas soon became inseparable. Together, they became the stars of the aquarium, captivating audiences with their graceful maneuvers and synchronized routines. But while the crowds cheered, Hugo's spirit remained restless. He had not forgotten the freedom of his former life. How much could one animal endure before reaching its breaking point? As the years wore on, Hugo's frustration boiled over into violent outbursts. His massive body would slam into the tank walls, raising alarms among staff and trainers, but still no one took action to address the deeper issues. In 1970, during what should have been a routine training session, Hugo lashed out. A trainer made the risky choice of reaching into his mouth, and Hugo clamped down, inflicting injuries that required 10 stitches. The aggression didn't stop there. In 1971, Hugo smashed his head so hard against the tank's plastic wall that it fractured, leaving him with a severe injury on his snout. Staff patched the wound, yet within a week the stitches came undone, leaving a permanent depression, a physical reminder of the damage captivity was inflicting on him. How much longer could Hugo sustain this agony before his spirit shattered completely? In 1972, another trainer at the aquarium recalled Hugo's aggression. Max Jacks described how Hugo, once gentle, had begun forcefully bumping into staff and visitors, showing little of his former tolerance. Hugo's mental state continued to decline, his behavior growing more erratic. The aquarium staff brushed off each incident as an unfortunate consequence of keeping large, intelligent predators in confinement. But Hugo's actions spoke of a desperation that no handler could fully comprehend. By the end of the decade, the signs of Hugo's deteriorating sanity were clear. The playful, powerful orca was now seen more often slamming his head against the walls of his tank than performing stunts. This behavior became routine, a harrowing ritual of self-destruction that escalated in intensity. Yet, the aquarium pressed on, promoting Hugo and Lolita as major attractions, drawing in crowds unaware of the suffering behind their performances. In early 1980, Hugo's condition began to show clear signs of deterioration. His usual energy faded, replaced by a sluggishness that trainers and spectators alike couldn't ignore. But the aquarium's management dismissed it, pushing Hugo to continue his training without any medical checkups. On March 4, 1980, during a routine rehearsal with Lolita, Hugo suddenly stopped moving. He drifted to the tank's surface, motionless as if in a deep sleep. Trainers called out to him, tossing bait into the water, but he didn't respond. What began as an ordinary day in the tank had shifted into a gut-wrenching realization. Hugo, the beloved orca who had captivated thousands, was gone. Was it simply his time, or did captivity push Hugo to his breaking point? An autopsy later confirmed that Hugo had died from a brain aneurysm, a fatal condition likely brought on by years of ramming his head against the tank walls. While the aquarium dismissed his death as an isolated case, animal activists and former trainers knew better. To them, Hugo's death was a chilling reminder of the mental and physical toll captivity took on him. Despite this tragedy, the aquarium continued its operations, quietly disposing of Hugo's body, rumored to have been discarded in a local landfill. The show went on, with Lolita stepping into the spotlight, left to endure captivity's silent weight alone. Hugo's death sparked new conversations about the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity, shedding light on the immense psychological toll these intelligent creatures endured. His story serves as a reminder that the consequences of captivity extend far beyond the performances. Hugo's life and tragic end haunt the world's perception of marine parks and entertainment, yet his story is just one among many. On June 15, 2022, João Silva and his friends set out for a day of sailing off the coast of the Azores. They had rented a sailboat for the day, planning to explore the rugged coastline and enjoy the open sea. The sun shone brightly and the sea was calm, promising a peaceful day on the water. João, an experienced sailor, was at the helm, guiding the boat as the group made their way farther from shore. João had grown up on the water, learning the ropes from his father, and had spent many years sailing along Portugal's coast. With him on this trip were three close friends: Miguel, an avid photographer who loved capturing the raw beauty of nature; Ricardo, who had recently taken up sailing and was eager to gain more experience; and Sofia, a marine biology student with a keen interest in the ocean's creatures. They had already explored a few secluded coves earlier in the day and were now heading toward open waters. As they sailed, they spotted a pod of orcas in the distance. At first, the orcas appeared to be swimming leisurely, but as the boat drew closer, the behavior of the pod changed. The orcas began swimming toward the boat, moving with deliberate speed. João adjusted the boat's course, attempting to steer a wide path around the pod, But within moments, one orca surged forward and rammed the boat's rudder with intense force. The strike sent a violent jolt through the vessel, knocking the crew off balance. The boat rocked heavily, and João fought to maintain control, but the rudder had been severely damaged, making the boat harder to steer. Another orca struck the stern of the boat, tilting it dangerously to one side. Water splashed over the deck as the crew scrambled to hold on. João attempted to adjust the sails to counter the damage, but the rudder was now completely disabled, leaving them stranded in the middle of the water. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, João sent out a distress call. The radio crackled as nearby vessels received the signal and help was on the way. As the orcas circled the boat, the crew remained tense, watching the dark shapes beneath the surface. But after a brief period, the orcas lost interest and swam away, leaving the boat intact but severely damaged. A passing yacht arrived shortly after, responding to the distress call. The crew was evacuated quickly, unharmed but shaken. The sailboat left behind slowly sank into the water. The orcas had disappeared as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving behind only the memory of their powerful attack. On the calm afternoon of April 3, 2020, 12 tourists gathered at the harbor of Ponta Delgada, São Miguel Island to board the Blue Horizon. Operated by the popular local company Oceanic Expeditions, the tour promised an unforgettable journey through the Azores water, where marine life flourished. At €65 per ticket, the passengers were eager for the chance to witness dolphins, whales, and other magnificent creatures in their natural habitat. Captain Joaquim Rios, a seasoned sailor with over 30 years of experience navigating the Azores water, greeted the passengers. He had spent decades working with the local fishing industry before transitioning to tourism, gaining intimate knowledge of the sea's currents and the area's weather patterns. He led the safety briefing with clear authority, ensuring every passenger was prepared for the journey ahead. As the Blue Horizon set sail, the boat sliced through the water with steady precision. Among the passengers was Calista Moreau, a 27-year-old traveler from France with a degree in environmental science. Having always been fascinated by marine ecosystems, Calista had spent years saving up for this trip. She had a particular interest in ocean conservation and had researched the Azores' efforts to protect marine life. Calista carried a camera, eager to capture not only the stunning beauty of the ocean, but also the unique behaviors of the marine life she had studied from afar. It was her first trip to the Azores, and she hoped this experience would bring her closer to the natural world she had always admired. The boat had been out at sea for nearly an hour when the group spotted dolphins leaping nearby. The passengers watched as the playful creatures skimmed the waves. But then, something larger emerged from the water. A tall black dorsal fin, followed by another. Orcas. The passengers observed the orcas as they drew closer to the Blue Horizon. Without warning, one of the orcas struck the side of the boat with a powerful hit that sent vibrations through the hull. The boat lurched, and several passengers lost their balance as a second impact followed. Captain Joaquim shouted for everyone to hold on tightly as the orcas continued to circle, targeting the boat's stern and hitting it repeatedly. The strikes caused the boat to list heavily to one side, and the passengers scrambled to cling onto the railing and any secure points they could find, trying to avoid being thrown off balance. With another violent jolt, Callista's grip slipped and she was thrown toward the edge of the boat. Her camera, which she had been holding tightly to capture the moment, skidded across the deck, tumbling off the side before she could react. For a brief, surreal moment, she watched it slip into the water, the device disappearing beneath the surface, a symbol of her lost connection to the very thing she had come to experience. Reaching out in a last-ditch effort to save herself, she caught the railing with one hand, her heart racing as she looked down at the dark shapes circling below. A final blow from the orcas knocked one man hard against the railing, nearly sending him overboard before another passenger pulled him back to safety. The damage to the boat became evident. Water was seeping through a crack in the hull, and the rudder was completely disabled, leaving them adrift. The crew scrambled to activate the emergency flare, and a deckhand sent out a mayday call, his voice tense as he relayed their position. The boat continued to rock as the Orca's strikes persisted and seawater began to slosh around the deck. Just as the situation reached its peak, a fishing vessel appeared on the horizon speeding toward them. The Orcas began to scatter, slipping away into the depths as the fishing boat came alongside the blue horizon. The fishermen helped the passengers across, handing out life jackets and blankets. Callista, drenched, sat silently, looking at the blue horizon, which was now sitting low in the water with its hull battered and rudder destroyed, unable to sail back under its own power. Back on shore, word of the incident spread rapidly. Oceanic expeditions temporarily suspended all whale-watching tours, and Captain Joachim, who had never encountered such aggression from orcas in his career, expressed his disbelief to onlookers. For Callista and her fellow passengers, what had been expected to be a peaceful encounter with nature became a traumatic experience, one that none of them would soon forget. Born and raised in Spain, Alexis Martinez had always held a deep fascination for animals. He started working at Loro Park Zoo in 2004, about the time the park introduced orcas to its marine life exhibits. This opportunity had been a dream come true for Alexis, who quickly rose through the ranks to become one of the park's leading trainers. At just 29, he was already recognized for his talent, calm demeanor, and dedication to his work. By the time of the incident, Loro Park housed 4 orcas and employed a small team of specialized trainers, each carefully chosen for their ability to work with these powerful animals. Quito was born in captivity in 1995 at SeaWorld Orlando, far from the wild waters where orcas truly belong. He knew nothing but the confinement of marine tanks, where he was groomed to perform from a young age, trained to execute precise routines for the thrill of a watching crowd. By 2006, he was transferred thousands of miles across the Atlantic to Loro Park in the Canary Islands, where he became a main attraction. But Quito was not just a showpiece. At over 6,600 pounds, he embodied the raw, untamed power of the ocean. Behind those controlled performances lay an unpredictable force, and even with rigorous training, there was always an edge of risk. His immense size, combined with an instinctive power, brought an underlying and constant tension to every interaction. Quito may have been born in captivity, but lurking within was the mind and muscle of a predator, a creature that could turn in an instant. And that Christmas Eve in 2009 would become a day that no trainer or guest at Loro Park would ever forget. The show unfolded with all the excitement and awe the audience had come to expect. Families watched in anticipation, eyes fixed on Alexis and the powerful orca by his side. For Alexis, this night was a chance to display the deep connection and skill built over years with Quito. He had worked tirelessly to perfect each movement, every flip and glide, and tonight it all came together. He was the star trainer, known for his bond with the orcas and his captivating performances, and this night would be no exception. As Alexis slipped into the water, Quito moved beside him, an enormous, sleek form cutting through the pool. Together they danced, a display of strength and elegance rehearsed to perfection. Each command seemed to unlock a moment of brilliance from the orca. Trainers along the edge, including Brian Roich, stood ready, their eyes trained on every flick of Quito's tail and rise of Alexis's hand. The crowd cheered louder with each feat, their applause swelling with every flawless move. Yet, as the performance reached its peak, a tension began to fill the air. Quito's movements shifted, his massive body slowing, his powerful tail cutting through the water with a new intensity. Alexis continued, steady and poised, guiding Quito with a calm certainty. But suddenly, Quito blocked his path, his immense body pressing into the space where Alexis needed to move. The crowd watched, captivated, unaware of the shift. In a terrifying instant, Quito's playful energy turned deadly. With a powerful lunge, he rammed Alexis, pinning him to the bottom of the 40-foot pool. Was this just a display of dominance or something far darker? The audience remained silent, captivated yet unaware, while trainers shouted commands that fell on deaf ears. Kido, locked in, seemed unstoppable, and what had started as a routine show had turned into a nightmare unfolding before their eyes. The horrified crowd, paralyzed by shock, began to realize they were witnessing one of the darkest moments in SeaWorld's history. Was this the moment that would finally shatter the illusion of control over these powerful animals? In that moment, the water turned from a stage to a battleground. Kido rammed Alexis again and again, crushing him against the walls of the tank, his massive body shuddering with each impact. Above, the trainers acted fast, sending signals and calling for emergency measures, but Kido held his ground, defying every attempt to separate him from the trainer. The orca surfaced briefly, lifting Alexis's body on his nose, as if presenting him to the stunned audience before dragging him back down into the depths. When Kido finally released him, Alexis's lifeless form lay at the bottom of the tank, his injuries devastating, his body bearing the brutal marks of Kido's force. The rescue team rushed to pull him from the water, but it was already too late. Alexis had died from his injuries. The park fell silent, the cheers replaced by the weight of what had just occurred. In the aftermath of Alexis Martinez's shocking death, Loro Park came under intense scrutiny. The park's initial explanation, drowning, quickly unraveled under the harsh truth of the autopsy. Multiple fractures, crushed organs, and clear bite marks told a different story, one of a brutal attack. Was this an isolated tragedy, or was it part of a pattern? Just 3 years earlier, trainer Claudia Volhard had suffered a similar fate, pulled underwater and battered by an orca, an incident the park brushed off as accidental. Could there be a deeper issue lurking beneath the surface? The fallout from Alexis's death reverberated throughout the marine entertainment industry. Loro Park suspended all in-water performances with orcas, an unprecedented pause for the park as they reassessed safety protocols and introduced stricter barriers between trainers and orcas. The incident contributed to a growing movement questioning the ethics of keeping these intelligent, powerful animals in captivity, pushing both Loro Park and other parks to reconsider the future of orca shows. The loss of Alexis Martinez stunned trainers everywhere, leading many to reconsider what it meant to work alongside these animals. Thank you so much for joining us as we explored the most terrifying orca attacks ever documented. These incredible creatures, while fascinating, remind us of the raw power of nature and the importance of respecting their territory. If you're eager for more heart-pounding stories, we've got another video waiting for you. Dive into the world of the most horrific shark attacks ever recorded, where you'll discover even more chilling tales of humans crossing paths with nature's apex predators. Click on the video and we'll see you there for another unforgettable journey.